that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. And we have guests today. We have Daniel Hoviss and Jonathan
Teller-Elsberg
and Katrina Wilson, who are from Solarize Dummerston, which and we had them and Peter Thorell have them on another show that will be on Channel 8 for those of you who are watching in the Brattleboro area this week. But this is the news broadcast, and what we do is I keep a news blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, and every day I put 10 or 15 items up there of news, and then once a week Tom and I get together and record a show in which we talk about the week's news. And we've got 22 items this week, so we have to cruise through them. But we're inviting our guests to talk about anything they feel like talking about relating to the news. And our first item comes up from an organization called Politico, and it's an opinion piece called "Why Are the Government Energy Forecasts So Bad?" And it says, in 2009, the U.S. DOE's Energy Information Administration forecast that U.S. wind would grow modestly, reaching 22 gigawatts of generating capacity in 2030. Just 6 years later, it has reached 66 gigawatts. So what's up with this? Got any ideas, Tom?
Well, I got to take away from what the source of this is. The forecasts are consistently off by a wide margin, always underestimating, never overestimating the future deployment of renewables.
Yes.
And they explain that the EIA seems to have failures of plain sight. The agency's latest reference case suggests solar capacity is going to double from 2014 to 2026. But in fact, it's doubled.
Already.
It'll double by next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
They actually had one report that they issued about 2 years ago where they projected 25 years hence, and another department a part of the U.S. DOE issued another report a week earlier that said that they had already achieved the 25-year goal.
But what's going on here is, first of all, they're looking at old data. And the second thing is, Congress is doing things that are making things change, and they're not picking up on that. They're not allowing it to happen.
And I think also that the prices for renewable energy are coming down, especially for solar panels and for installations. So you have a sea change where solar is reaching grid parity, and it becomes economically feasible and desirable to put in a solar plant where the fuel is free, or a wind power plant.
Free fuel is a
Free
good
fuel.
deal.
Yes. Free and renewable. The whole concept of renewable energy is that it is something that you don't have to pay for or mine or scrape a mountaintop
Or mess something up in the process. You don't have to put mercury into Vermont streams.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another thing that has changed is, we hit on this a little bit before when Peter was here, with community solar. There are legal mechanisms and financial tools being developed, ways for people to go solar or go with wind, businesses to invest, that didn't exist previously. Some of that is creativity, some of that is new laws coming into effect at the national level, the state level, local level. And those, that's going to be something that, statisticians in an office, will have a hard time keeping up with. If what they're used to is just mapping out trends based on raw materials. So
I have a question. Is this department checking in with each state's renewable energy goals? That would be a good way to forecast.
They've got restrictions placed on them that make it in the EIA, which is part of the DOE. There are other parts of the DOE that would do exactly what you're saying, but the EIA doesn't do that, which is why
they're off.
That and the fact that they have to know that something is happening legally in order to project that it will happen. which means that they cannot legally project anything that
Is based on
on any
on an
kind of
unknown-
speculation.
on an unknown
on
factor.
any unknown. And they've never been able to keep up with the declining cost of solar or wind. They just haven't been. So it's made it impossible for them to produce the information that they are using to guide Congress, business leaders. You're far better off going to a place like Lazard Furs or Morgan Stanley or something like that and getting market information.
Maybe even using a Ouija board.
Yeah, maybe. Actually, yes, even using a Ouija board.
Energy Ouija board.
energy Ouija.
Okay, we have to move on. Think Progress tells it is illegal to knowingly ignore the dangers of global warming, according to a Danish court. The court ordered the government to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 25% compared to 1990 levels by 2020 in order to preserve the low-lying Netherlands and protect its people from the dangers of global warming. Interesting.
They look like they're having a good time up there.
Look at that.
Meanwhile, our Supreme Court hobbles the EPA.
Yes,
and
well,
votes inappropriately once again.
yes.
So
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that develops, but we'll get to that. I believe that comes up later in this list. Clean Technica told us also on Thursday, June 25th, new research from GMT Research forecasts that U.S. community solar sector is to reach a tipping point soon, growing fivefold in 2015 and regularly reaching 500 megawatts by 2020. And that says right now it's 215 megawatts will be installed in 2015. That's huge growth just to get to 215, but they're expecting it to go to 500 megawatts. And that's what our guests here are talking about this week. If you want to check that out, I suggest you go to the Energy Week special. It's on Channel 8 in the BCTV broadcast area.
It's quite informative.
So I just want to pipe up and say some recent legislation I feel is going to slow this down in Vermont more than we were hoping.
This is a very good, important point, Katrina. Tell us about it.
So just recently they put setbacks on solar that didn't exist previously, starting yesterday. So I think that that's going to slow down solar. It's going to be harder to site community solar
And
farms.
this is not legislated, it was just decided in a,
Nope, this one was legislated.
oh, it was legislated.
There's another one from the Agency of Natural Resources that doesn't let you, as of last year, it happened last year, I don't remember the exact date, you can't install in river corridors where they think the river might go, say in 25 years. So there's that one, which isn't legislation, that's just a rule from Agency of Natural Resources. This legislation came from the Public Service Board, and that now there's setbacks from abutters, from the road, and there's another one too, but I don't remember it.
well, the river corridor setback issue should apply to all construction and all development. Because it's
Yeah,
really silly.
I
to
think it
single
does,
out
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Solar.
It's not just solar.
Does
Who
it?
made that decision?
Does it?
I
single
don't know
solar?
if it applies to other construction, but I do know it applies to solar.
Okay. Clean Technica on June 26th told us Google is planning a new data research center, or data center, I'm sorry. And not only will Google be using renewable energy to power it, but it will also be reusing a retired coal power plant. Google announced the development of the official blog, on its official blog. The data center will be reusing the soon-to-be retired Widows Creek coal plant in Alabama.
This,
And
yeah. Here's
this
a
is
picture of
this
the
is a plant.
existing plant
Yeah.
when it was still operating.
Now, they're not gonna retain much or any possibly of the plant, of the buildings, but they are taking the site. And that's, an interesting point here is that when they take this site, they're taking its electrical connections, which means they've got immediate access to a lot of power.
Which they need.
Infrastructure, which they need.
Yeah.
And that really is important, and it brings to mind all of the things that we've seen about solar power going up on landfills, on brownfield sites of various kinds. And we're seeing it on median strips of superhighways and so forth. Using land that's available that really can't be used for anything else in many cases.
This is pretty interesting though, because the transmission lines that were going out are now going to be coming in
Yes,
to provide these guys with the power that they're going to need for the enormous amounts of servers and stuff they're going to have on that site.
Unless they're generating extra electricity and sending it out onto the grid.
Well,
They're not supposed to be doing
their
that.
generation, is their generation intended to be on site?
there probably will be, knowing Google, but the problem is, one of their data centers will take as much power as a medium-sized town. And so there's a lot of power that's needed, and they may not be able to they typically do solar on their rooftop. But, you know, they will very likely buy wind power or solar power from someplace, and they could buy wind power from someplace that's a long ways away.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be directly transmitted anymore. They can do it by bookkeeping.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's true. Okay, Clean Technica also told us, same day, scientific models supported by the UK's Foreign Office show that if we don't change course in less than 3 decades, industrial civilization will collapse due to catastrophic food shortages triggered by climate change, water scarcity, energy crisis, and political instability. And I had put in here a note, if we don't change course.
Well, this article is a biggie. It's written by a guy named Nafiz Ahmed, who was really an Englishman.
No doubt,
and he
the
usually-
descendant of Alfred the Great.
Yeah, he usually talks about terrorism. He's a good investigative reporter. But here he's talking about this, and I can't emphasize as much the takeaway. If we don't change course, we are heading for catastrophe.
However, ladies and gentlemen, we are changing course.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Okay, do we need to, did you have more on that one?
I could talk for an hour on it. Let's move on.
Okay, let's do a special show on that one of these days. Next item from Argus Media, U.S. Senators Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, and Jerry Moran, Republican from Kansas, and Representatives Ted Poe, Republican from Texas, and Mike Thompson, Democrat from California, reintroduced their MLP Parity Act. It would allow renewable energy developers to form master limited partnerships, now only available to fossil fuel projects.
This is one of those things, you know, that the EIA, when they're doing projections,
Exactly.
they're, as you said, the rules of how they do their mathematical analysis require them to ignore that sort of change.
Yes.
You know, but if you open up the door to $1 billion new of investment, lo and behold, renewables are going to grow faster than you had otherwise projected.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. And that's why you go to Morgan Stanley before you go to or you could go to NREL.
Yeah.
NREL's projections are a little different from the EIA's.
This is an economic change more than anything else. They're permitting them to enter into a kind of partnership that's been around for the utilities for years,
Yeah.
but they haven't been able to do it. And it's going to attract investors.
Yes,
That's what this is basically all about.
okay. For Saturday, June 27th from ECNS, we have this, a post-2020 climate control action plan to be submitted by China to the United Nations in the end of the month, will be a powerful driving force on energy research and innovation, according to the head of the International Renewable Energy Agency. It will see investments estimated to total $6.6 trillion. That's just China.
Well, China already has the world's largest installed capacity of wind and hydro, as well as the vast majority of solar power and biogas. So they get the world's largest of some, and they're leading in the others, and they're showing us what to do.
Right, and I'll tell you, this is one of the things where any person who's conservative and likes democracy in the United States should sit down and think, because what China is doing here is they're positioning themselves in a marketplace where they will not be dependent on foreign power, they will not be dependent on foreign fuel, and they will not even be dependent on money, because that stuff is going to be delivering power to them for free. And the United States is being told that it should avoid that path by people who claim to be patriotic Americans, who claim to be pro-democracy, and who are financed by fossil fuel interests, which are benefiting from their pro-democracy, they claim, pro-American, they claim, directions, and they are fooling a lot of people, but they're not fooling Debbie Dooley.
We will talk about her very shortly.
Yes, we will talk about Debbie Dooley.
That was a good rant, by the way.
Very short one. I tried to keep it short. We don't have much time today. Okay. From Nuclear Street, nuclear power plant news, jobs, and careers. Germany's nuclear power phase-out begins its final stage with the closing of the 1.3 gigawatt Grafenrheinfeld.
Say it again.
Grafenrheinfeld nuclear power plant. The plant is the first in the final 9 plants scheduled for decommissioning. E.ON is closing it earlier than scheduled for economic reasons.
Interesting.
Never heard that before.
Vermont Yankee was closed for economic reasons, and what was the plant in Wisconsin that was closed?
Can't think of the name.
I've forgotten. I'm thinking Waseca, but that's a town in Minnesota. But there was a plant closed last year for economic reasons in Wisconsin.
It's happening quicker than we could imagine.
And there are, power plants that they're threatening to close down unless they get special handouts from state governments and so forth. So including, what's the one in New York?
Oh, Indian Point.
Indian Point?
No, it's not Indian Point.
Oh, the one up at Rochester.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of it, but yeah.
Yeah, they're planning on.
Well, they're in a unique situation there because getting power from some other sources are very expensive.
Yeah, until somebody puts in lots and lots of solar and maybe some Tesla batteries. Okay. What do you have there, Tom?
This is the next thing you're going to be
Oh,
talking
the
about.
next thing.
Yeah.
Clean Technica says a report released by the Environment America considers an ongoing battle between electric companies and customers over the value of solar energy. It shows that utilities' assertions that net metering costs them more than it is worth are false. Such systems actually provide benefits exceeding the cost. Now, Tom, explain that graph.
Well, I have to look at it. So the blue ones is the retail electricity rate.
Yep,
What the customer's paying, hereabouts is 15 cents a kilowatt hour.
yep.
The red one is the estimated or calculated value of this electricity to the utilities. Now, why is it worth more? Well, one of the reasons why it's worth more is that they are avoiding costs for expensive peak power.
Yeah.
Another way they're saving costs is they're using less of the transmission lines because it's more locally generated.
Yeah.
So they're getting the benefit of all of this. Now, it's not happening here in Vermont,
Oh.
but it is happening in other states where they're saying, hey guys, you're costing us money, we have to raise your rates. And in reality, they're making out.
Yeah, what's happening in Vermont is that the utilities realize that they need to get into the solar energy game and that they're starting to build really big power plants. They just announced one up in Windsor. I think they didn't say the exact size, but it's probably in the 10 megawatt range or larger.
Now,
That's a big one.
You've got information that I haven't seen.
Oh. Ta-da!
Dan, and I just have a question. I thought the largest in Vermont could be 5.5.
No, I think that the utilities could actually create a larger
Yeah.
installation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Five-
they're exempt. That's the largest net meter setup can be 5.5
Yeah.
megawatt.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
not net metered because the utility would own it. It's a utility scale project.
We've
I
got,
don't know the exact details.
Yeah.
I did hear it on the news.
but I mean, up until very recently, the largest plant in Vermont was 2.2 because that's the most you could get with net metering under the speed program. But, things change.
That was the one here in Brattleboro?
No, the one in Brattleboro is bigger.
Uh-huh.
And I've been told that that's going to be 4 megawatts.
Oh, at the proposed landfill.
at the
They got
proposed-
special
There's a
permission
there's
from
a
the
They got
legislature.
special permission.
There's
But
a 2
there,
megawatt plant behind the Holiday Inn.
There are a
That-
whole
That's
bunch.
2.5.
2.5, there you go.
Yeah, there
I'd
are,
love to hear more about that sometime.
Yeah.
That was a great project.
okay. Planet Save, by golly. Okay.
Here we go.
Solar powered pros and cons. Is solar worth it? If it were a disease, we'd have a full-blown epidemic for $0 down and $0 leases. There are easy ways to go solar these days. Even your grandmother can do it. But what are the actual pros and cons of solar power these days? And we have
Interesting
a
graph.
up on the screen.
What this graph is graphing is how much you would get if you spent, I think it's $1 million, on the various types of energy
Yeah.
and how many jobs it would create. And I got a kick out of the last one there. That's 1,600 bicyclists generating power with their own bicycle.
But what this says is that if you spend $1 million on natural gas, you create 5 jobs, 7 jobs from coal, 12 jobs from a smart grid, 13 jobs from wind power, 14 jobs from solar power. Biomass will bring you more power yet because you're going to be hiring foresters, and building retrofits will bring a lot of jobs. But there was one thing on this, Tom, that I know you missed because I didn't point it out. And that is, where did this come from? And down at the bottom of the screen, there's a very small thing that says that it came from 2 sources. One of which is a little group at UMass, and the other one, which is
Political.
It's
economy research
it's
institute.
there.
Perry.
Political Economy Research
Institute. Perry. Yeah.
at UMass, which is known for tracking down various problems that happen with the environment. But the other one is a group called Washington Policy Institute? Center. Now, the thing that's interesting about this to me is that the Washington Policy Center is a climate change denier organization, which is very much into the free market and conservatism and so forth. And they provided information saying, yeah, solar power is making a lot of jobs. And sorry, gang, but
Right.
Natural gas is not.
Even if global warming weren't happening.
there are good reasons to go
Yeah.
to renewable power even without global warming. And the reason is because we are coming to grid parity. So, our next item comes back to Debbie Dooley. And this came from the Sydney Morning Herald, which of course is in Australia, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. And this is an opinion piece called "Activism Fomented by Koch brothers Turns Against Them." The Koch brothers political machine Freedom Partners says it will raise $889 million pushing conservative causes in 2016 presidential election. An emerging champion against the Koch brothers is Tea Party activist Debbie Dooley, who is running all over the country telling people why they should put in solar.
A little quick article about Debbie.
Oh, she's lovely.
A 56-year-old founding member of the Tea Party movement who describes herself as a Grammy to her 6-year-old grandson rather than a political activist. Now, this is her description. I'm a preacher's daughter from Louisiana. Dooley has always been political, she says, but after the economic collapse and a Wall Street bailout, she abandoned the Republican Party as one of the first 22 people to host a Tea Party rally. So she's been in this Tea Party right from the beginning. Dooley says her fight for renewable energy sits neatly in her conservative Tea Party philosophy. She's opposed to government interference and big business monopolies. She believes in the rights of people to generate and sell their own power, which the utility companies are trying to prevent, not in this state, by charging solar owners increasing fees to use the grid. She instinctively believes in a decentralized power grid, which she said would be much less vulnerable to terrorist attack. And asked if she believes in climate change, this is interesting, she says she won't even address the question. Once you start talking about climate change, conservatives stop listening. But it's interesting to see that she is realizing that even though she's a libertarian conservative, this trend toward newer renewable energy is benefiting them, contrary to what the Koch brothers are telling you.
Right, and one of the things that I read in an article, I think about a month ago, was from the Heritage Foundation, from one of the Koch brothers funded organizations, which talked about Debbie Dooley going to, I don't think they mentioned her by name, going to Florida, trying to get the laws changed down there so people could benefit from having solar power put on their own roofs and connected to the grid, And they described this by saying the Tea Party in Florida has been infiltrated.
Isn't Florida where the governor said you're not allowed to talk about renewable energy? You're not allowed to talk about climate change.
Yes,
Right.
that's one of the states. And, you know, we're getting into a point here where...
They had a truth malfunction.
That's a good term, Jonathan. We're seeing, I think, a division beginning in the Tea Party and in the Republican Party.
Yes.
Where there are conservative, pro individual groups that are sliding off to one side, and there are people who are doing what the Koch brothers tell them to do, sliding off to the other.
Well, that's basically what I think I just said in different words.
Yep, but that's why that organization is planning on putting $889 million into this upcoming election. And when you think about that,
That's a lot of money.
that is a lot of money. I mean, a lot of people would do some very strange things for $889 million.
They are already.
Yeah. Okay, from Chicago Daily Herald, I got this one. Germany's oldest remaining nuclear power plant has been shut down, part of a move initiated 4 years ago to switch off all the nuclear power plants by 2022.
We kind of just touched base on this one from
Yeah.
a different article, but it's the same
Right,
plant.
it's the same thing. Now, this plant has been shut down at this point, but there's one thing that I want to point out to people, and that is that the shutdown of this plant was scheduled under this thing that happened immediately after the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. But the shutdown of all of the nuclear plants in Germany had already been scheduled before that. And it was just a matter of getting them offline sooner by a few years. The Germans had already decided that they were going to go, the Energiewende started, I think, in 2001. So it was, or maybe even earlier, I don't know. I'm sorry.
So they'll all be shut down by 2022.
Yeah, yeah. There were 17, there are now 8 remaining. Okay, Monday, June 29th. Genesis Energy Corporation, based in London, and SHP Malta Winya, based in, I'm just guessing at the pronunciation, based in Norway, have signed a memorandum of understanding for a modular mini hydro plant that could efficiently and effectively meet Nigerian and other African energy needs quickly and with no negative environmental impact.
I have to see one of these, a modular mini hydro plant.
Well, you know, we had James Perkins on our show.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he had
He had,
basically just
he had
that.
micro ones. These
Yeah.
got to be bigger than
These
that.
are bigger.
but-
This is from This Day Live. They may have designed this to run Archimedes screw turbines.
It could very well be.
I don't know what kind of technology they're talking about, but that
Well,
would be an easy one to do, and you don't need a dam for it.
They say they can these things can be deployed within just 6 months without the
Yeah.
prohibitive costs of diesel oil or natural
Right.
gas. You're not paying for fuel. Duh.
Okay, Green Biz, still on June 29th, Monday, 13 miles off the coast of Rhode Island.
Uh-huh.
Block Island boasts 17 miles of beaches, 365 freshwater ponds, 250-foot bluffs, and 150 bird species. It also has electric costs of 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Now the
50
island-
cents.
50 cents. Now, and actually some of them are above that. Now the island is about to become well known for another reason. It will host the first offshore wind farm in the United States.
That's
At
interesting.
Long last.
Yeah, long.
Well, yeah, because people in Massachusetts in the same general area are blocking wind farms. These are people with yachts.
People with yachts.
Don't like wind farms. But Block Island is saying, hey, guys, we need the power.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're going to be connected to the grid as part of this. Which
They
is
will
going
be
to,
connected, and so will the rest of Massachusetts and Rhode Island.
we're
And they
making
need
progress
it.
here.
They need it because this business of high costs in Massachusetts is getting out of control. Okay, we are up to Tuesday, June 30th. This
Well,
morning.
this is an interesting one.
This morning, June 29th, but it's actually reporting on June 30th, at 3:03 local time in Nagoya, Japan, Swiss pilot Andre Borschberg took off in a single-seater airplane from Nagoya, endeavoring to reach Hawaii in what will be the longest exploration leg of Solar Impulse's round-the-world mission.
If you were trying to figure out what that picture was, it's the solar
Go back to
airplane.
the
I'll go
pictures,
back to
yeah.
it. Yeah,
Well,
it's
it
a
looks
very
better than I
interesting
do.
picture of the solar
Isn't that
airplane.
something? That is an airplane, ladies and gentlemen, taking off. And you can see the guy just below the right wing, kind of with his hand up in the air if you look closely. And the wings, the wingtips, don't they have bicyclists?
Yeah, you don't see it in the picture, but at the far ends of those wings, there's guys on bicycles holding the wing up, so it doesn't drag on the ground. That's literally true.
Yeah, and that plane will be flying today. They've already reported that it has gone about 60% of the way from Japan to Hawaii.
Well, we've talked about this a couple of
Flying
times. It's an
along.
interesting project, you know, it really is.
Indeed. Yep. Okay, AZ Cleantech Nesta, the world's largest producer of, and here I thought this was Nestle, producer of renewable biodiesel, CLP Motorsports and X Games, and rallycross champion Tanner Faust made history when CLP Motorsports Superlight Coupe crossed the finish line in Santa Monica, California after driving across the United States on one tank of renewable diesel fuel.
1 tank of gas,
37.6 gallons. It's a big tank.
2,507
That's a lot of
miles.
That's a lot of miles.
2,507 miles.
So do the math.
Average speed is 68 miles an hour with 37.6 gallons of renewable energy. Renewable.
68 miles an hour. Somebody should be giving him a speeding ticket.
Well, and a
going
lot
too
of the, and a
slow.
lot of the West, you know, that's below the speed limit.
Well,
Actually, you're probably right.
Like 75 is kind of,
Yeah.
and
And
then
this
there's,
isn't-
right, Montana, where it's, you know, you choose what seems like a safe and reasonable speed,
Yes.
Yeah.
and you
And-
hope that the state trooper agrees.
This car this isn't a really super car. I mean, it's lightweight, specially made for this thing, but they got 66.7 miles per gallon.
Really,
I mean,
it.
that's achievable now.
get
It's
that.
happening now in Europe.
Well, you know,
I got 75 miles to the gallon.
Yeah,
on my
yeah.
Insight.
in
Yeah.
the inside.
Just going to Westminster the other day.
I drove my Prius down to Atlanta and back, and I got an average of 56, and that's a 2001 Prius.
Yeah.
And they,
Well, you know, it's downhill to the
yeah, except that coming back, I was going uphill, and I got better mileage.
Wind,
Yeah.
trucks.
Okay. Next from Platts. Electricity industry representatives and consultants were divided Monday, this is important, on how much impact the U.S. Supreme Court's remand of the mercury and air toxics standards to a lower court is likely to have on power markets and investments. The court did not vacate the standard, but sent it back to lower court. Now, this is important because the news media made it sound like
They did.
the thing was defeated.
Yeah.
Right.
But it wasn't. They said you have to take into account the medical costs versus the cost of the standard, and
And they're considerable.
they are considerable. And in fact, you know, we've heard about them. The cost of the cost of fossil fuels in the United States includes about 350,000 people dying every year. And the medical costs attendant on that and the other people who have problems, okay, this is just mercury. How much is it worth? How much would it be worth if we had no mercury in the streams in Vermont? Just Vermont.
Well, for one thing, you'd be able to eat the fish you catch.
Right. But one of the organizations that had prepared a statement for the Supreme Court and had prepared the argument that this was worthwhile was unable to deliver its argument before the Supreme Court because it came too late. They will be able to deliver it to the lower court, which has to consider it. So this is not a dead issue here. This is something that the lower court could say, yes, it's worthwhile, and if it does, the Supreme Court is probably in fact, it probably won't go back to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is likely just to let it stand. Okay. Clean Energy News tells us a new peer-reviewed article published in scientific journal Science estimates that 30,000 square kilometers of land have been lost due to oil and gas well pads and associated operations in North America since the year 2000. 30,000 square kilometers. The DOE says we could get 35% of our energy by using 3,400 square kilometers for wind farms.
Well, one of the things we're hearing is wind and solar takes up a lot of land.
Yeah.
And we don't hear that fossil fuel takes up a lot of land.
Yeah.
And there's a map there that shows you that they do.
Also, with wind and solar, it's not mutually exclusive use. Like, you could have grazing going on.
Oh, yeah,
The animals actually enjoy the shade.
You're not gonna have goats on an oil
You
field.
don't have much on an oil field.
Yep. And, you know, we see pictures often of solar farms and of course wind farms in the United States with cattle under them, but
Oh,
solar
absolutely.
farms in Britain, they very commonly have sheep grazing in the.
Well, right up here in Western Avenue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they're an attraction.
Yeah.
I mean, people stop to look at, I don't know if they're sheep or goats, but, you know, they stop there to,
Probably sheep.
they stop there to feed them and pet them, and, you know, it's
Yeah.
cool.
You
It's
don't
cool.
pet goats. You know, there's a joke, old joke. What goes around a button?
A goat.
A billy goat. My mother told me that when I was about 6 years old. It
Couldn't
took me
figure it out.
until I was 50 to figure it out. And here Daniel shows me,
buttonhole.
just like that. Okay, Clean Technica gave us this. Samsung researchers developed a technology that enables them to coat silicon battery cathodes with high crystal graphene. They can now virtually double the capacity of lithium ion batteries.
Yay.
This energy density increase would almost double the range of electric vehicles without adding a pound of weight. That is interesting. And
Well, a lot of people are looking at batteries and things like that. I mean, a lot,
Yeah.
high-tech engineers, scientists. Some of them are going to hit the nail on the head, and this is one of those things it looks like they did. Can you imagine doubling the capacity of a battery by a simple change in its construction, not even changing its size, shape, or weight.
That's fantastic. If
It
you
is.
know, if it'll come out of the lab and into manufacturing.
At a reasonable cost and a reasonable
Yeah.
speed.
If anybody's wondering what graphene is, it's just a form of carbon, and there's a picture of how it's arrayed. We've probably heard of buckyballs
Yeah.
and some of these other things. This is
Nanotubes.
nanotubes. This is a whole new area of research, and again, some heavy people are working on this thing, and there's going to be some things that they hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, and this is, this is the kind of thing which, like silicon, which, when I was a kid, silicon? Are you kidding me?
That's sand.
That's sand. Why would anybody be interested in that? The effect of this is only beginning to be understood. Now, Tom, I'm going to do something strange here, and I'm going to read the last article next, and then I'm going to go back to the article that's after that.
Alrighty, let's see if
Okay.
I can find the last article.
And the reason is because there are two articles together, and I think our
Here's
guests
the
would
last one
probably
here.
like to
Here's the last
talk
one,
about
yep.
them.
Let me get this guy out of
The
here.
The first one, the one I'm reading next comes from C News Renewables. And it is, where is that? I don't know. Texas-based community-owned utility Austin Energy has received a record low firm solar power bid for under $40 per megawatt hour. That's
4 cents
per
a kilowatt hour.
kilowatt hour in a recent 600 megawatt request for proposals. Austin Energy has a goal of to source from renewables 55% of its power by 2025, and it is retiring coal-fired and gas-fired power capacity. This means that they're going to be retiring that gas-powered capacity with cheaper solar source. This is, we've heard people talk about grid parity. This is grid parity. This is below grid parity.
Yeah.
And
This
every
is the
indica-
new grid parity.
Yeah, and yeah, and we're going to be talking in the future, Tom and I, about how, natural gas is not at grid parity because grid parity has been established by wind and solar.
And natural gas is going to go anyhow because we're using it up so fast it's not going to last.
Yeah.
Also, I just heard on the news last night, I think it was a great radio show on PPR, Public Radio, about the incidents of earthquakes that are occurring with greater and greater frequency.
We've got one of them.
That's what we've got coming. Okay, I'm gonna read through both of these, and then we can have a field day on whatever it is that comes out of it. The first is from Environment News Service. A statewide ban on fracking is now official in New York State, nearly a year after communities won the right to ban oil and gas developments locally. This action concluded the New York Department of Environmental Conservation's comprehensive 7-year review and completely prohibits fracking in the state. Now, I will point out, there's a ban in Vermont on fracking, but there's no place to frack in Vermont because we don't have the resources.
We haven't
But-
found them yet, anyhow.
But the Marcellus play is about half in New York State, and there's a huge amount of natural gas in that play. And they're just saying, sorry, we cannot accept the idea that the people above that are going to be subjected to the problems that they're going to have associated with that. And this is particularly problematical because the EPA has said, well, if you do all the things that you have to do to make it safe, it'll be safe. But realistically, can that be done? I don't think so.
I think Marcellus Shale, the first developments of the Marcellus Shale was where we first saw the water fountains coming out in the kitchen that are
Right.
burning.
And the next one that we have here from the Columbus Dispatch, an Oklahoma woman who was injured by an earthquake can sue oil companies for damages. The state's highest court has ruled. This opens the door for other potential lawsuits against state energy companies. Researchers have blamed fracking for the dramatic spike in earthquakes in that state. Now, if they can sue for earthquakes, they can also sue, probably, I would think, for things like you turn on the faucet and you've got stuff coming out that you can light.
In this particular case, it's slightly different. They're not fracking that's causing the earthquakes. They're conventionally drilling oil, but it comes with a whole bunch of salt water. What do we do with it? Well, let's put it down under the earth where it was. Well, it sounds good, makes sense,
Yeah.
but as it turns out, it's causing earthquakes. Duh, nobody ever thought of that.
Yeah. And
If
this
they
is-
did, they weren't telling anybody.
I
Yeah,
guess oil lubricates a little bit better than water does.
I suppose.
Well, they're re-injecting it someplace else. So they're-
That I think, Jonathan, is exactly
Yeah,
the point.
I mean, so they're shifting the balance of
Yeah,
pressure
yeah.
from one place to another, and then the Earth shifts in response.
That's right.
It comes back into balance.
Now, we actually have close to 15 minutes that we can just talk because we sailed through the news. So Katrina, you had something that you wanted to mention. Do you remember what it was?
Dan was mentioning the Win Stanley solar project that's between
yes.
exit 2 and 3. And so that's a substantially sized solar array, and I think it was one of the last speed ones that went in before the speed program changed again
To reset.
to reset.
Which is a name I hate. But, yeah, and that was
2.5.
2.5.
If I remember correctly, it's 8,300 panels.
Oh, really?
That's an
Okay.
awesome site. I've driven over there, crossed over the do not cross lines and taken some pictures while it was under construction. And the crews were great. They're like, yeah, sure, take some pictures.
Daniel, are you going to make those pictures available? to
Would you like a
anyone?
picture? I mean, you
I would
probably
love
have
to have-
wonderful
I
pictures.
would
You know,
love to
I've
have
done a
pictures of that
I did
for
a
Green Energy
time
Times.
lapse, but I haven't
There you go.
turned it into a video yet.
Oh, really?
But I had a camera sitting up on
You
New
know,
Chapter roof the
I've
whole
got
time.
some software that might make that into something interesting where you can record a voice and have pictures and go from one picture to another. And you can pan across them and zoom in and zoom out and so forth with the pictures. I can tell you about that after the show if you want.
Okay.
This is, what?
Oh, I was just thinking, you could probably write a small story about that for Green Energy Times about how,
Yeah, I think that would be
how
good.
that project came together and you were selected for the speed program and then, getting all the contractors together and.
Would you like to
it's
author
a big project.
Would you like to author a Green Energy Times article? I bet I could get it
It's a
in for you.
great idea, Dan. I would need help writing that.
I will volunteer to help you,
Okay.
There
okay?
you go.
Write the article, send it to
I
me.
heard you say that.
Yeah, but
Okay,
seriously.
and then we'll do the video piece to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
And if we do that, we could probably put it on BCTV.
Okay.
That's a, you know, they had a limit of 2.2 megawatts for the speed program. But, you know, these things, it could have been 2.5 and measured as 2.2 in some way.
Well, they measure it at the
Yeah, the
inverter.
winter.
They,
At the
don't they,
inverter.
they measure it
They
at the alternate
changed,
at the
it
AC.
changed.
Or is that from the
Legislation
recent- yeah.
changed, and I don't remember when the change happened, but
Okay.
initially it was the panel production,
Okay.
and then it's the
Aha,
inverter
AC,
production.
yeah.
aha. Well, but the way it was that for a long time in Vermont, the biggest solar array we had was 2.2 megawatts.
That's right.
And the reason for that was because that was a point at which if above that, you didn't get the benefits of the speed program. And I don't know how many biggest arrays in Vermont there were, but there were about 10 of them, I think. There were a lot of them all over the place. And now they're going on for bigger ones. And you were telling me about one that was,
I thought the new legislation, but Dan corrected me, was that you could put them into 5 megawatts, 5.5 megawatts, you know, depending on which way you measure.
but for the recent
That's if you,
program.
for net metering.
For net meter, but Dan
Yeah.
corrected me and said that was
I
for
may
net
be wrong.
metering.
Right, if you don't want net metering, you can go bigger.
And the utilities.
No, it has to be utility.
The
It can't,
utilities-
anyone can't do
Well,
it.
right.
It has to
The
be.
utilities
You would
can't,
have
well,
to do
anybody
net
could do a bigger array, they just wouldn't get net metering benefits.
Right.
But the utilities can't get net metering benefits anyway, so they don't have that as a limit. And so.
Well, another thing that I just recently learned in the last few days is that as part of the overall New England grid, which naturally Vermont is a part of, any electric production facility that's over either that is 5 megawatts or that's over 5 megawatts is subject to on-off switching from the grid manager, from ISO. So if the grid if there's more production going on than usage at a certain time, the ISO could order a large facility that's over 5 megawatts,
To
could
put a
order it to
cloud
turn
over it.
off.
It's gotta order,
Right.
you guys
Right,
have
right.
to put a cloud over your thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, whether or not they will is a different question, but you subject yourself to the risk that you would be prevented from producing power and therefore revenue.
Well,
Unless you could store it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Could
But,
unless
I
you
mean,
can store it
yes.
or have some sort of use for it. And there's dozens of ways you could deal with that. I mean, BMW has been talking about getting gasoline out of carbon dioxide.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things that we've mentioned on this show from time to time is that you can actually burn ammonia in a car. And I'm not talking about the ammonia that you buy in the store, which is ammonium hydroxide. I'm talking about actual ammonia, which is a very different thing, which is normally a gas, but it can be easily pressurized to liquid. And you can burn that. And if you have excess power, you can make ammonia with it. And then you can, if you've got a car or a bus or something that is set up to burn it, you can burn it. And they ran buses in Belgium during the Second World War on ammonia because it was something that they could do.
New old technology.
New old technology, that's right. But the ISO can order these things on and off. Well, we have this new thing that's coming along called a virtual power plant. Are you familiar with that? The virtual power plant is basically just a computer, and it tells different resources in different places and different technologies to turn on or turn off. And the result of that is that you can have very well-balanced power out of completely renewable resources, which include a very heavy dependence on solar or wind. And from what I understand, there's there's 1,000 of these things or more currently going in Germany. And they just, run that thing and keep the grid balanced. And Germany is like 32% renewable now. And, it wasn't that long ago that people were saying if you get more than 5% from solar, it's going to destroy the grid because.
That's right.
And
Right, especially during eclipses.
Right.
5% from solar is difficult during an eclipse. But the German grid, which is now 32% renewable, and a lot of that is solar and a lot of that is wind, what they've done is they've taken, in the course of going to that number, they've taken the most reliable grid in Europe, where they had an average customer outage of about 15 minutes a year, and they've changed that and made it into an average customer outage of 10 minutes a year. They've made it more reliable by going to a higher amount of solar and wind.
I think that was the ultimate promise of the smart grid that's happening nationally, and whether we'll see that soon or whether it's already happening with larger companies that use a lot of electricity and
Yeah.
can have their systems controlled remotely.
Right.
I think
And-
that is actually happening as far as I know.
It's happening in some places. I had forgot to mention smart grid technology in the virtual, the virtual power plant. That's part of it as well. And when you consider that, it just means that the demand is there. When the demand is adjusted for periods when the production is available.
Or when the demand is higher.
The production
You wanna
becomes
shave
more
it.
available when the demand is higher, which is why solar power is so wonderful for the utilities, and it drives their costs down, because solar power happens to come on at exactly the time of day when people work, go to school. It's a beautiful system.
Turn
I
their
don't
air
know.
conditioners on.
It's proof of intelligent design, I think.
Whoa.
I know a guy who's in fact, we've had him on the show. He's a world-class physicist, and he was an atheist. And he came to me one day and he said, I don't know what it means, but I believe in intelligent design, because nobody could imagine water being what it is
Water.
without
That's true.
in some kind of intelligence in there. And it's one of those scientific things that water is so special. It's amazing, and we could do a show on water.
It's true.
Yeah, we could.
There's a book out there written, The Secrets of Water.
The Secrets of Water.
Yeah.
I should get that. and
You
look
should get
at it.
that. It's a
Yeah,
great book.
absolutely.
There's a power plant in Massachusetts that uses pumps for electric pumps to pump water up to a holding reservoir.
Yeah, Northfield Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah. So
And
that's
it'll
another
back up
storage
solar
mechanism.
just as well as it'll back up nuclear. It was
Right.
put
It
in to
doesn't-
back up nuclear, by the way,
Right. Just in case.
just
Yeah,
in case.
we keep saying we're gonna go down in Northfield and take some pictures and talk about it on the show, but we don't get around
We
to
haven't
doing
got
it.
That
around to
would make a
doing it.
Come on,
terrific
guys.
water slide too, like
Except at the end when you go through the
the
show.
end, you'd have to work on that.
Well, actually, since the whole thing is underground, you wouldn't get much of a view while you're.
No, but what a ride.
Thrill.
I don't think you're allowed to swim in the reservoir.
Probably not.
But that's, the reason why it's there is because nuclear power, coal power, gas power, all of these thermal power systems, they may be there 24/7 most of the time, but they produce power 24/7 whether you want it or not. And you've got to figure out something to do with it when you have too much, because otherwise everything burns up.
They also are not self-bootable, meaning they require power to start up. So, especially in the case of nuclear power, to start a nuclear power plant
Requires power.
external power.
Right.
in
Right, it has to
addition
synchronize with the grid.
That too.
Yeah.
But you have to have power to get it going.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems, when I was about, 25 years old, I had a couple of friends who were nuclear engineers. And they said, they came over one day and they were talking, and they said one of the things that was a real problem was the possibility of common failure, where 3 reactors all melt down in the same place at the same time, like happened in Fukushima. Another one was, a guy said, a big problem
Never happened here.
is when a nuclear plant loses its electrical source, which is what happened at Fukushima, and melts down as a result. And then one of the guys turned to me and he said, but you don't have to worry about this, because you'll never see a meltdown, because the chance is the chance is about 1 in 10,000 in a reactor in a year. So you might see one meltdown worldwide in your lifetime, but it'll never happen.
Are we up to 4 or 5 at this
We're up
point?
to 11.
Our
Okay.
lifespans
We're
have
up
been
to 11.
increasing.
Yes, I see.
So, you got to give them credit there.
One of the things that I do every once in a while on the show is I name the 11 nuclear reactors that have melted down out of the 500 that have come online. Roughly, it might be fewer than 500, but it's
Ballpark.
about 500. And 11 have melted down. That means that 2.1% of our nuclear reactors have melted down. Would you put a nuclear reactor into a town if there was a 2.1% chance that it would melt down?
I would hesitate to put it in my town.
Really? You know, I mean, but historically, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
2.1% of the nuclear reactors have melted down.
You know, if we could have fun, I'll play some devil's advocate. That given that there's a lot of nuclear reactors that do exist, and given, you know, building a nuclear power plant incurs, you know, a big sort of upfront carbon hit, you know,
Right.
in the energy to construct it. And there's some ongoing with the fuel and everything like that. But they, you know, especially once it exists, its operation is significantly lower carbon footprint than, you know, obviously than the fossil fuels.
Well,
And, you know, I mean, given the, you know, there was the talk, you mentioned one of the articles, 30 years to change course or else a good chance that all civilization simply completely collapses.
Right.
You know, I personally think that existing nuclear power plants should be allowed to continue, not necessarily every single one. You have to look at each one's capacity to remain safe as you can. You know, I think we need to prioritize the elimination of the fossil fuels.
Jonathan, there is certainly a lot of people who agree with you.
Yeah. Because, I mean, the amount of energy we're talking, like all this growth of solar and wind is great. You know, it's still, you know, that far from reaching where we need
One
to be.
of the things that I have told people is that you know, I feel that it's almost certain that we're going to be switching to renewable power and that we will be able to stop climate change during the 21st century. But the problem is, it might be that we'll stop it soon enough to save civilization. But we're losing species at a rate of about 1 every 10 minutes.
We talked about that last week.
And, you know, I mean,
Those don't come back.
They don't come back. Well, maybe we're going to develop the wherewithal to clone all the
Well,
species.
some of them,
we want.
I mean, a lot of them, the scientists haven't even discovered them yet.
Yes.
You know, you just sort of know that when you eliminate an ecosystem, you're eliminating a lot of species, whether or not you know what's
Whether
there or
they're
not.
there. Yeah, and you don't have to go very far to realize if there's an ecosystem, there's a species. Because you go down in a cave and you're very likely, if
Yeah.
there's water in there, to find a species of crustacean or a species of fish or something that simply doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have to consider the value of that. But the World Health Organization has said, and I talked to their naturalists, one of the species they're worried about is moose.
Mm-hmm.
The Audubon Society has said 2 of the species that they're worried about are the Baltimore oriole and the bald eagle. This is serious.
Well, the Audubon's, it was in either Scientific American or one of the magazines in the last year, an estimate that 50% of North American bird species are threatened with extinction.
That's correct. Yes, that's
you know,
correct. That was
due
the
to
Audubon
climate
Society
change.
said that.
Research out of the Audubon Society.
We are at the end of our hour, so we're going to have to say goodbye.
goodbye.
One last thing.
Yes, go ahead.
So you keep talking about producing more and more power. We haven't talked about conserving. So I just have a quote from one customer who only installed a 3 kW. I called in to check in with him, and he said him and his wife are having so much fun trying to use less than their system produces.
And it's only half the normal size system.
And it's only half the normal.
Yeah.
That's
for them.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
See you later. And makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.